I'm going to not be affected, everything's fine, and just keep coming and going.
As long as you're in the country for less than 180 days.
And because I have Social Security, I can qualify as a permanent resident.
Yeah, but you have to do that at home. So you go to the consulate at home and present them with the the pension statements, and they will give you a visa to a stamp in your passport is basically all it is. A sticker that they put in your passport. You bring that back and you go to immigration, and they within a few weeks will give you a permanent resident document.
And then I never have to deal with any of that stuff again.
Never, except you have to register where you live. You always have to submit a notification of change of address or change of activities. If you're going to start working or anything like that, you need to notify them within 30 days. But other than that, there are no more renewals. And the notification is simple. You go on their website, you print out the form, sign it, and submit it at the desk.
Cool. Thank you.
He has an FM2. I do not. If he precedes me in death, he's a little older. Would I not benefit then from anything from the sale of the house?
From the sale of the house, no. It actually would have to be in your name. And there's a considerable amount of ambiguity there, because the changeover from him to you would actually leave you that you would need to own the house for 5 years, and there's a lot involved with that.
It's in a trust right now.
Yeah, and you could get an FM2, and you actually qualify being the wife of someone who possibly permanent resident or temporary resident. You qualify as a dependent.
Get her.
The new rate, I don't know yet. Okay, come to my office, we can talk about that.
Give me another month.
Yeah, I really think it's best to wait as long as you can, because I think the next few months in immigration are going to be a little bit of chaos. Everyone's going to, if anyone was here 3 years ago when they did the change, there was a change about 3 years ago from the booklet to the card. For 6 months, it was a show there in immigration. So I think there's a good chance that it will be that way while they get accustomed to the new system. There's also a change of administration coming up, which means that a lot of the people that are in immigration right now will no longer be in immigration after December 1st. So.
Explain to me one more time why I would want a permanent resident versus a temporary resident.
Because you don't ever have to go back to immigration if you get a permanent residence. That's the biggest advantage. Temporary resident will be good for 4 years, or up to 4 years, and then so every 4 years you can renew that, or at the end of the 4 years opt for a permanent resident.
And the application for permanent resident, is it any different than temporary resident?
You have to show different prerequisites, and the pension. If you're here for 4 years on a temporary resident, or if you're here for 3 years on an FM2 and then go to 1 year on a temporary resident, then that qualifies you also for permanent resident.
If I'm going for this permanent resident with my pension, I don't have to have an FM2 or an FM3?
No, you just have to apply outside of the country.
Great.
So are there any stipulations once you become a permanent resident that you cannot leave the country for too long?
No, and that stipulation really was never penalized. The only question that was involved with that was that if you wanted to become an inmigrado or permanent resident after your 4 years of having an FM2, then you had to be in the country within a certain amount of time, or you could be ineligible for becoming a citizen or a permanent resident. Right now, they're not saying that. It's still the same with citizenship. If you're out of the country for more than, I believe, 18 months in the 5 years preceding your citizenship application, you cannot become a Mexican citizen. But as for permanent resident, there are no stipulations like that. Yeah.
How does a permanent residency affect our U.S. cars?
I don't know. And that's, you know, I hate to say that, but that's the truth is there has been no change with that. We could, we could predict that the people who had FM2s that were allowed to be here on virtue of having a pension, now, if they're here on virtue of having a pension, then they as well will be allowed to drive foreign-plated cars. I don't know that. I almost always recommend to everybody that they get a Mexican-plated car, and because there's a lot of hassle involved, in my opinion, with a foreign-plated car, and that's just me as a resident, and I'm here all the time, and I deal with it a lot. But if a lot of people choose to have them, and I don't think the Mexican government is going to do anything that is going to severely hurt the American population here. Mexico has the largest population of Americans outside of the United States, and we bring a lot of money to this country, and the foreigners, the foreign investment and tourism bring a lot of money to Mexico, and they are very aware of that, and they don't want to do anything to jeopardize that investment. Anyone else?
So if you have an FM2, and my FM2 is due to be renewed in February. So in theory, in February when I go in, I could move to the permanent resident status.
In theory, you don't have a pension, correct?
No, but I have other income.
Well, and see, that's one of the things. I'm not sure if outside income is actually going to be what gets you the permanent residency. I think it might be a pension. You might actually need to have a registered pension from a government, because they're a lifetime benefit as opposed to something that might go away. I don't know that. And as well, if you have investments in Mexico, then you possibly could qualify. That's one of those questions that we're going to have to wait and see what happens. And
it used to be they check your bank balance, you know, and if you needed to, you put a little cash in your bank and let them check it, right?
And I think they're on to us. So I think they might, the requirements might be a little stricter, because they don't want us to be a burden on the country. As much as we can be a benefit to Mexico, but as well, if you get granted permanent residence and really relying about how you're, not that would be the case, but in theory, if someone were to show 3 months of bank statements that had a lot of money coming in, and then that was all their income for the whole year, and then they're here in Mexico and they have a permanent resident status, it could be very problematic for the government, because they do offer these benefits like the impound card and various others. With residency, theoretically, you're also eligible for some forms of health care that they have here. You might have to pay a little bit for them, but you are eligible. They're probably not very good forms of health care, or they're actually, let me correct myself on that. They're excellent forms of health care, but they're not what we're accustomed to in the United States. The systems here are very good, but you have to stand in line, you have to be there early, and there are no optional procedures. It's a socialized medical system.
On the capital gains, is that going to be excluding from capital gains every 5 years? Is that both the temporary and the permanent, the new one?
I believe it will be temporary and permanent.
And permanent,
yeah.
Once every 5 years, you just get your capital gains.
We'll have to wait and see on that. It makes complete sense. The law actually says residents of Mexico, and the FM3 and FM2 and the permanent residency, the migratory, were never called residency, so they had to clarify that in a regulation. Whereas it says residents of Mexico, and so you are automatically a resident. And there's a very valid legal argument that that's going to mean temporary or permanent resident means that you are a resident of Mexico.
So this application that I make with my pension for a permanent resident must be made at a Mexican embassy that's located outside of Mexico.
That's correct.
Okay, got it.
So let me add a little bit about what you just said on the Social Security. It's just because we just had a case These people were from Argentina, not the United States, but the kid had an accident. And we found out that if you have an FM2, you are eligible for the Seguro Popular, which is the insurance that Calderon made. And he made all these new hospitals. We have one here in Playa. The General Hospital is a very good hospital. It's not so crowded, very good service. We were surprised. Actually, the mother is from Poland, and she said, well, this is as we have in Holland. I mean, it's the same. So it depends. If you go to a big city, then you have to be online. It's not so nice, and so on. But here in Playa, we have a very good hospital. If you have the FM2, you can apply for that. It's not very expensive to be treated. Nobody needs it. But in the case of emergency, it's something that it's good for you to know that you have it.
And I really have to agree. The medical system, you're actually, as well, you can qualify for Social Security, the actual Social Security system EAMS, if you pay for it, and it's minimal. It's, I think, $1,000 a year or something along those lines. And my experience with the EAMS system has been very good. The only time I've ever been to an EAMS hospital was a friend of mine. I was training in a mixed martial arts class, and a friend of mine fell and dislocated his shoulder. He was employed with a hotel here. We took him over to the EAMS hospital, told them the whole story, and because he was insured with the EAMS system, they took him to the hospital in Cancun, gave him x-rays, set his shoulder, gave him all the treatment he needed. It was very fast, simple, easy. I've heard horror stories about waiting in line. I have a couple of employees that go and they go and wait in line at 4 o'clock in the morning for a doctor's visit, and I think there are good things and bad things about the socialized medical system.